Hello, and welcome to Spooky Stitches, the podcast that is 50% wool and 50% ectoplasm. My name is Sheena Perrell. I'm the knitwear designer and author of 11 books now. You can find all of my socials and links down below in the description. So it has been a while since our last proper episode. I'm not going to talk too much about what I've been doing in the meantime. I have a whole video somewhere over here that you can watch going into that. There are some trigger warnings for that video. But suffice to say that the last 6 to 8 weeks have been pretty intense. So I'm trying to just take a break and take it easy a little bit, because there's been a lot going on. A lot of it I can't really talk about online, or at least not here on YouTube. So yeah, it's been a lot. I do have some good news. So today is July 4th as I am filming this, so apologies if there's background noise. People are idiots and they keep setting off fireworks in the middle of the day, even though we have them banned here and we're in the middle of the woods, and it can cause all kinds of problems like giant forest fires. So anyway, I can't do anything about the noise, but I did have time to film today, so we're rolling with it. Anyway, today is July 4th. Tomorrow is Tuesday, July 5th, and that means that Magic in Midtown, the second book in the A.J. Marshall duology, will be out tomorrow. It is currently up for pre-order on Amazon if you just want to grab it now, that way you don't forget. I will also be putting it live on Gumroad tomorrow. I do have to do that manually, so it might not happen until kind of late in the day, but it's going up on Gumroad, and you can get all ebook formats through Gumroad. If I don't have your format listed, just message me. I will be happy to add it. Currently, this series is not going out in paperback. I've talked previously about why I chose to stop producing paperbacks, at least temporarily. But it really just saves me time and money, because my paperbacks typically don't sell that well outside of conventions, and I'm not doing conventions right now. I am, however, looking to start doing conventions again. So I'm kind of on the lookout. If you know of something good in the Seattle area, pretty much anywhere between Seattle and Portland, let me know, and hopefully I can show up. I do also have a new short story series running for patrons. It is called Midnight Radio. It's a series of short stories that are interconnected, and we will be getting the first episode today on the podcast. Everything else is available for patrons only, starting at my base tier of $3. But you can still read the first chapter on my Patreon for free. So other than that, my wrists are doing better. I have started picking up the knitting and crochet again. I'm not going as intensively on it as I was, in part because I've also been playing games on my Switch more, and it seems that the combination of using the Switch and knitting is part of what was causing my wrist pain. I can pick computer work and knitting, or I can do computer work and the Switch, but I cannot do all three. So I'm kind of picking my poison right now, and thankfully I am more in the knitting mood lately. With that in mind, I don't really have a ton of finished objects this week. I did make this headband right here. This was just I need a quick win. I'm gonna knock something out real quick. So all it is I did linen stitch from here, made the little triangle shape, increased, then did just plain stockinette for the band so that it would be a little bit stretchy but not super stretchy, and then came across again. There's a little loop built into this right here so that I can pull it through and have that little bow effect, and then I made the tie in the front, which is just like a ring that goes over it. and it's held in place with a couple of bobby pins, and this means that it is adjustable, so I can tighten it as the knit relaxes and loosens, which I love wearing headbands, but the hard plastic ones are really painful for me, and the like knit exercise bands don't stay in place. So this was my attempt to make one that actually works. So we're trying it out. Today is my first day wearing it. I'm mostly just wearing it for the podcast, and we will see how it turns out. Okay, I cannot remember what yarn I used for this. It was leftovers. I can't tell you. It is some kind of cotton blend. I think it's cotton bamboo. I've used it before. I'm pretty sure I've used it for something on the podcast, but I cannot find that project right now. So in my Ravelry, I can't look up my notes. I will try to find it somewhere and put it in the show notes, but I think I used like a size 3 needle or something for this. So it's very, very basic, just using up some leftover yarn. And it was just a quick win that I needed to get done. I needed to finish something and feel accomplished. I have picked up the blue sweater vest that I was working on. Unfortunately, it is living in my desk at work at the moment. I wore my rainbow sweater to work during Pride, and I had no idea that it had a magnetic effect on local knitters. So I now know every knitter and crocheter in the building where I work, and we've started having meetups at lunch to knit and crochet. So my sweater vest is living at work in my desk for those meetups. I have made quite a bit of progress on it. I am about ready to join in the second ball, but I'll try and have an update for you on that one in the next podcast. My blanket is still kind of on hold. I did pick it up and crochet one row on it, but again, my wrists are not super happy right now, so I'm trying to go easy on the crochet. I have been working on the scrappy socks just a little bit. Here they are. And I'm about to start the heel on this. I was kind of putting off working on them just because I wasn't sure what yarn I wanted to use for the heel. And I think that I probably have enough of the purple and blue to do that for the heel. So I need to finish one more stripe and then I can do that, and I dropped a bunch of stitches on here. So this can go get set aside someplace safe. The main project I've been working on lately is the By Pride sweater. So this is for my friend Becca, who helped us move. This is her thank you gift for that. It is a tangled mess right now. And so this is the hood. This is based on the Everett Street hoodie. And the way that that is made is you knit like up one side and down the other, and it's sort of like you have a scarf sitting on your head, and then you pick up the pieces for the back and the neck. So this is where we are right now. And I think I need to add a little bit extra to this side, and then I still have a few more inches left on this side. And then once I get that done, I can do a seam down the back of the hood and then pick up stitches for the back. So that's coming along. That has progressed a lot in the last couple of weeks. It's amazing what happens when you just sit down and work on something. It actually gets done. It's shocking, you know? And that pink yarn is, anyway, I cannot remember what the pink yarn is. It's a wool bamboo blend that I got in somebody's D-stash, and I got a huge sweater quantity for it. So I'm only going to be using part of it for this sweater because of course there's going to be purple and blue in it as well. But that is coming along. That's pretty much all I have been working on. I haven't had a ton of time. This weekend is the first time I feel like I've had a chance to sit down and catch my breath. and it's also the start of Camp NaNoWriMo, which is related to NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, except for July you set your own goals. So my goal is to finish up the Midnight Radio series, all those short stories, and then I'm going to be starting on my publishing roadmap book, which is the third book in the author roadmap series. The first two books are already up on my Gumroad, and Patreons have a free download available on patreon.com. So that is it for the knitting and crocheting pretty much. I have picked up a couple of skeins of yarn. I had some that was given to me by someone who did not know my birthday was 2 weeks ago and still just gave me yarn anyway. And then I also found some at the thrift store. So let me go get those skeins real quick. Okay, so I guess that this is technically another whip, but I'm not working on it really actively. It's just like around here or there. Making myself a little crossbody bag. Just very basic single crochet. And my cat wants into the room. I'm using a size J or 6mm hook. This is the yarn. And then this is the other cone that came with it. And I'm pretty sure both of these came from Yarnia. This one definitely did. It has the tag inside. And I think these must be custom blends because they don't have the name on the inside. I've bought from Yarnia before and really like their stuff. I have a couple of cones of it in my stash. But actually the cursed sweater that's in timeout was made from Yarnia yarn, the Ravenclaw sweater. So I do really like it. I have no idea what the fiber content is on these, but I was drawn to the colors, especially on this one, which again, it's Ravenclaw colors because I have a problem and I cannot get out of my toxic relationship with J.K. Rowling. So but those are the two that I bought myself. I guess this one technically I kind of bought myself. This came from my coworker, and it is a ball of Lion Brand Mandala. It is 100% acrylic, which I don't usually go for, but I mean the colors are pretty and I love a gradient. So I actually got a second ball of this because I want to make a circle sweater out of it, because I think that circle sweaters with the gradient yarns, it's so perfect. It looks so good. That was how I ended up with the rainbow sweater. So I absolutely love that. And then he also gave me this one, which is Lion Brand Ferris Wheel. I believe it's also 100% acrylic. Yes. And oh, this is in the color Cotton Candy, and this one is Spirit. So love both of those. Thank you, Eugene. And now I need to figure out what I'm going to do for him in return. So trying to figure out what my options are. He said he doesn't want yarn, so I figure that means he needs a hand knit. So that is all for our fiber content this week. I think it is time for our sponsorship moment because it's my podcast and I'm sponsoring it. So tomorrow is the release of the H.A. Marshall duology, the second book, which is Magic in Midtown. I will be releasing more from that world in the future, but it's going to be from different characters' perspectives, different points in the timeline. So you'll just have to stay tuned for that. This does wrap up A.J. Marshall's series, so you can now safely buy both books and not get left with a cliffhanger or anything like that. Pro tip, there are some coupons floating around if you're a subscriber to my newsletter or a member of the Patreon. there are a couple of discount codes floating around which are only good on Gumroad. Amazon does not let me produce coupon codes for Amazon. I can only do it through my personal shop. But all of the links are down below if you want to check it out on Gumroad. I also have new stuff in the shop. I just got some stuff to make some new stitch markers. So there is some spooky ooky stitch markers as well as some fun summery stuff that's up there now. Anyway, if you like spicy disabled heroines, queer women in charge, all wrapped up in a steampunky box with an Art Deco bow tied on top, then please head on over to the shops and check that out. I haven't been watching or reading a whole lot, but I did get a new Switch game, like I mentioned earlier. It's on the lines of like Cozy Grove, if you've played that. It's not a new game, but it's new to me. It's called Witchwood, and you play this grumpy old witch in a spooky swamp who is going around finding ingredients so that she can get her memories back from this goat. And it's very fun. Ash has already finished it. We were playing together. It's a single player game, but she was playing on the PlayStation while I was playing on my Switch. I will give you a warning. These Switch controls are really weird. So if you have the option of playing it on PlayStation, I would go that route instead. I just happened to find it on sale on my Switch, and that is my console of choice. Okay, now let's move on to Knit Tea. And I think that this is going to become a regular segment over on the blog. So check out probably like the first Friday in each month. I'm going to do a Knit Tea segment so that you can see all of the upcoming events. So let me just get my laptop over here. July 1st. We are now into the Tour de Fleece, in which spinners make yarn in tandem with the French bike race. If you don't plan to participate, it still might be a good time to look up sales for Learn to Spin kits, fleece and fiber, that kind of thing, because a lot of places are running sales right now. July 9th and 10th, Birmingham will have a Black Lead Yarn Festival in Yarningham. It looks to be a little bit different from your standard fiber fair, so be sure to check out their website, and this is Birmingham, England. Camp Idahaven in McCall, Idaho will be hosting a Fiber Love Retreat from August 18 to 21st. $325 covers a cabin or campsite, all your classes, all your food, which is all vegetarian, and I so want to go to this. But I would have to take off 2 extra days of work for the travel, which is 8 hours each way for me, and I just don't have the money for it right now. But I think that it looks amazing. I really want to go. Maybe next year. Sandhill Crane Vineyards in Jackson, Michigan is hosting their annual Wool and Wine Festival on July 30th. And Oh So Pretty and Clever is hosting a 5-night crochet retreat in, wait for it, Tuscany, which sounds amazing. And it runs from October 28th to November 2nd, 2022. So it is coming up fast if you want to get involved in this. You do have to make sure that you have your visa and your passport set up and everything. Italy is very particular about travelers, so make sure you check all our travel rules beforehand. Guys, I studied in Florence, which is partially where this is happening, and you're gonna have such a great time. It's gonna be amazing. I don't know what all is on the itinerary, but hopefully you'll also get to see Prato and Pisa. That whole region is super well known for like they came to fame and prominence because of their wool industry and because of their textiles. And then in the 1600s, wool was becoming cheaper in Italy because better wool was coming out of Northern Europe. So they switched to doing all silk and luxury fabrics, which are amazing. You definitely need to check out the museums there. Make sure that you go to Palazzo Pitti's Galleria de Costume, which amazing. I can wax poetic on this. I have an entire website that I have built dedicated to textiles of this period. Again, link down below. Anyway, and then lastly, on July 30th in Prairie City, Oregon, will be the Prairie City Fiber Fest. Again, I want to go. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to. I would really like to. Summer means that we are officially into state and county fair season. So I know a lot of you guys do participate in that. You submit your knitting and sewing and crochet to the competitions. So if there's something special going on in your region, let me know. I would love to add different regional events and news and happenings. If there's a big museum exhibit or something along those lines, I don't know. The only thing that I'm not putting into Knit Tea is stuff like pattern releases or sales. If it's a totally new yarn line, then I'll talk about it. I just don't want it to be like the type of mailer you would get in your letterbox on Sunday. I want this to be more newsworthy stuff. So with that, I think that it is time to transition over to voiceover Sheena. This week we are reading the first book in the Midnight Radio series, episode 1, The Ghost of Coalman Gorge. So this is the first in a series of Cthulhu-esque short stories that I'm running on Patreon. So if you're into things like Scooby-Doo or Gaslamp Fantasy or like weird cryptids, stuff like that, then you will probably enjoy this series. I have a lot of plans for Patreon right now, but unfortunately I can't expand the benefits unless the membership expands. I have to make it worth my time. So please do go check out the Patreon. If you can't join, maybe just give it a boost on social media, because I have some great stuff that I would love to do, but if it's only, 7 or 8 people, it's really hard for me to justify the amount of time that I put into it. So anyway, here we go. It is time for our spooky story, The Ghost of Coalman Gorge.
Dating is overrated. There, I said it. I sighed and sipped my milkshake, trying to distract myself while my so-called date high-fived his teammates at the next table and shivered. I'd had way too much milkshake in a short time, and goosebumps marched up and down my arms. I picked at my fries. At least the diner had good French fries with just the right amount of crisp, though in my opinion it's hard to ruin a potato short of burning it black. The football team was getting rowdier, whooping and hollering at each other so that I couldn't even hear Elvis on the jukebox anymore. Everyone had been so happy when Brad asked me out. My mom even bought me a new skirt for the occasion, so thrilled that a football player wanted to step out with her strange little girl. I sighed again and leaned over to the table behind me, where a middle-aged man had left behind a newspaper. Mom had stopped me from bringing a book, but there wasn't anyone to stop me from reading the paper, was there? Maybe there would be a crossword in the back. Smoothing out the pages, I glanced again at the table full of football players and cheerleaders. I didn't belong here anyway, and we all knew it. What was I even thinking, saying yes when Brad asked me out? Football players don't go steady with girls who edit the school poetry magazine and blow the curve on history exams. So instead of laughing and joking with my classmates, I hunched in my chair reading about the 10th anniversary of a local woman's disappearance. Marie Hannity and her 3-year-old son Jimmy vanished April 7th, 1943. No sign of them or their 1938 Buick could be found by police. A search of Coalman Gorge was fruitless. She was last seen wearing a black hat, green dress with black trim, black handbag, and green shoes. Mrs. Hannity is 5 feet 2 inches and of average build with dark brown hair. Her son would now be 13 years old, with blonde hair and brown eyes. I'd barely gotten through a paragraph when a shadow passed over my table. Brad looked down at me, a little sheepish. "You can join us," he said. I looked over at the rowdy group of cheerleaders and football players by the jukebox. They'd pulled 3 little square tables together. Ned Bruner and Jake Watson were throwing sugar packets at each other, and Susan and Bonnie were gossiping about another cheerleader that wasn't with them. I barely knew her by sight and didn't care who she was or wasn't going steady with, and even less if you played basketball or baseball. Thanks, but I don't think I have much to add to the conversation, I said, remembering belatedly that I was supposed to smile. Mom kept telling me I needed to smile more. Concentrate on the good things, she would say. So instead of focusing on how uncomfortable and boring my date had become, I tried to think about chocolate milkshakes, french fries, and good books. Well, we can get out of here, Brad suggested. At the next table, his friends overheard. Ned let out a wolf whistle. Go get him, Brad. This time, Susan threw a sugar packet, hitting her date in the forehead. Shut up, Ned. He grinned at her. What, just because you wouldn't park on the first date, you think Lily won't? I pushed the newspaper and my plate away, my milkshake suddenly turning in my stomach. I'd like to go home now, please, I said firmly, standing up. I did not smile this time. Brad shot his friends a glare. Really, you don't? If you want to stay, that's fine, I said quickly, turning on my heel and walking to the door, face flaming. I didn't want any of them to see it. I knew this was a bad idea. Lily, wait, I'll give you a ride. You can't walk all the way home. Yes, I can. My house was at the edge of town, but I walked the distance plenty of times and hitchhiked in a pinch when the weather was bad. Cole Harbor was that kind of town. Everyone knew everybody, and I could stop almost any car on the road for a ride if I needed it. Brad followed me out of the diner at a jog, finally catching up on the sidewalk. Overhead, thunder rumbled, and a distant glow of lightning briefly lit up the clouds. My date caught my arm. Look, I'm sorry about them, but at least let me give you a ride. You don't want to be walking home in a storm. Well, he was right about that, at least. I'd just polished my favorite black and white saddle shoes for our date. The last thing I wanted was to come home drenched and covered in mud. Rain began to spit down on us. I sighed. All right, fine. I followed him to his dad's big aqua and white Bel Air. He opened the door for me and then ran around to the driver's side while I adjusted my skirt and crinoline, trying not to look at the huge back seat. The last thing I wanted right now was to go parking, but I knew more than one girl had been in the back seat of that car. He started the engine and backed out onto the road. When the silence stretched between us, he started playing with the radio, but the storm and the mountains blocked out any signal there might have been. He cleared his throat. So, anything interesting in the news? I shifted uncomfortably. Not much. The 10th anniversary of the Hannity case. The what now? The Hannity case. You remember, don't you? We must have been 5 or 6 when Mrs. Hannity and her son went missing. His brows knit. No, I don't think I remember that. Of course not. Normal 5-year-olds don't pay attention to such things. He was probably too busy learning how to throw a football in the backyard. Meanwhile, I would sneak down to the living room after my parents went to bed to listen to ghost stories on midnight radio. The silence stretched again. I realized it was my turn to say something, to ask a question or something, but I couldn't think of one. But Brad saved me with another question. So, you're into that Nancy Drew type stuff, right? You read a lot of it at school. Detective stories, yes. I had a whole collection of Nancy Drew novels, but I'd outgrown them a long time ago. Now I read Agatha Christie, Charlotte Armstrong, and Rex Stout. Do you like to read? Brad barked a laugh that sounded way too forced. No, not my idea of a good time. Of course, you like football. What's that supposed to mean? Only that football players never submit anything to the Orchid, I said, naming the poetry magazine. Or the school paper. You're on both, right? Yes. He shook his head. I never have time for that kind of thing. He turned left onto Miner's Way, and my head jerked up. I thought you were taking me home. I am. It's faster to take Coalman Road. Yeah, but there's that old bridge. So? He gave me a look out of the corner of his eye. You know, the old bridge. Yes, I walk over it almost every day. But it's at night, and look. He pointed at the sky, which was completely black from the clouds. Yes, it's dark. That tends to happen at night. He grumbled, clearly not telling me something. Listen, this is my dad's new car. I don't want to drive it off the bridge, okay? Someone always wrecks over there. It's a lot safer than it used to be, I said weakly. It seemed a poor defense. The old bridge on Coalman was one of those old-fashioned covered bridges so common in the area. It wasn't in the best repair anymore, but it was safe enough despite the cobwebs and peeling paint. The county finally made some changes to Coalman Road and added guardrails, so now there was only about one accident a year instead of one every time there was a storm. But locals still avoided the bridge whenever they could. Rumor had it it was cursed, but then a lot of things in Coal Harbor seemed to be cursed. I thought again of Maria Hannity and her missing boy. We all knew her car was probably somewhere in Coalman Gorge, but in 10 years there'd never been a sign of it. We bounced along in silence for a while, turning off the paved road onto one that was only gravel. Silence filled the car again amid the pattering rain. It was my turn to speak again. So, what do you do for fun? I mean, aside from football. I winced. Even to me, that sounded rude. Before he could answer, the car began to slow down. Up ahead, a car blocked the road, and figures moved back and forth in front of the headlights. One of them approached the car. Brad rolled down his window, and I made out the form of Sheriff Keynes. Sorry, y'all. Road's closed. We've got a downed tree up ahead. I'm waiting on someone to bring up a chainsaw so we can clear it. We can't get through it all? Brad asked, his voice uncharacteristically high. Nope, sorry, not in this boat. The sheriff banged on the roof of the car, which was far too wide to maneuver through the heavy underbrush and thick woods on either side of the street. Where are you headed? Just taking Lily home, he said, pointing at me with a thumb. The sheriff bent down to get a better look at me through the window, shining his flashlight at us. I could see his brain working. You related to Bob McMahon? My dad. He nodded. Everyone knows my dad, but most people pretend they don't know me, or they forget who I am. Just because I told a scary story at last fall's harvest bonfire and accidentally sent 10 elementary schoolers screaming for their mothers. You'll have to go back up to Coalman then. How long do you think it'll take? Brad asked, craning his neck for a better look. Could be a couple hours, especially if the rain starts coming down. Reluctantly, Brad waved off the sheriff, and the car turned around, heading back to town. We could go back to the diner. I'll get you an ice cream. We can dance. And I want to go home, please, I said again, clenching my fists in my skirt. I could just imagine the wolf whistles if we went back to the diner after 10 minutes away. If you don't want to take me, I'll walk. Your parents can't get you? My dad has the truck. He's working the night shift. Brad cleared his throat and tugged on his collar, slowing down at the four-way stop at the center of town. A few doors down, the lights on the diner shone brightly, the main source of light on the street. Slowly, he turned left onto Coalman Road, eyes starting to each side of the street as we headed out of town. It was only a 5-minute drive, but he clenched the steering wheel the whole way. Even with only the headlights on, I could still see he was white-knuckled. You never answered my question, I said at last, trying to prod him back to reality. What question? What do you do outside of football? He cleared his throat again, shrugging one shoulder. You know, the usual hang out with the guys. I wasn't really sure what hanging out meant. When I was little, I assumed it involved a swing set and imagined monkeys and Letterman sweaters dangling from the crossbeam. but now that I was in high school, it mostly seemed to be rowdy groups like the one we had left at the diner. I fix cars. My dad got me this old jalopy when I turned 16. I'm working on fixing it up. Oh, what kind? It's a 38 Studebaker. Seen better days. It's a bucket of rust now, but I'm going to get her all cleaned up. I had no idea what a Studebaker was, but it was enough to send him off on a ramble about engines and brake fluid and rust, so I assumed he was happy with the turn in the conversation. Meanwhile, I pretended not to be bored to death. I knew this was a mistake. Why had he even asked me out? We'd barely ever spoken. We had no friends in common. I never went to football games unless someone made me. I was the weird, chubby girl who read all the time, didn't smile, and got asked to do other people's homework. I was about as far from a cheerleader, his natural mating stock, as possible. He cleared his throat again and made another tug at his collar. If he kept that up, he was going to tear off a button. So, the school paper, huh? You like writing? This time I gave him a sideways glance. Yes, I like to write stories. And poetry, I shrugged. I'm good at it, I suppose. The heavens opened up and rain began to come down in earnest, a wall of water temporarily blocking our view. Brad took his foot off the gas and muttered something that would get my mouth washed out with soap as he fumbled with the windshield wipers. They squeaked to life, flying back and forth over the glass until we could see again. A woman stood in the middle of the road. Brad slammed on the brakes and the car slid to the side. I grabbed the dashboard with a scream as the back of the car slid off the road and onto the gravel. The car stopped, both of us panting. I looked over my shoulder. Through the back window, I could see a woman in a dark dress and hat staring at us. What the hell? Brad demanded, his face white. He looked back at the woman and made a grab for the gear shift. Nope, we're going. There was blood on the woman's forehead. Wait, she's hurt. She's dead. I punched him in the arm, hard. Ouch! He stared at me in the shock. What was that for? You almost hit someone and you're just going to walk away? She's hurt. Lily. I threw open my door and got out of the car. In an instant, I was soaked. I ran around the back so I was only a few feet away from her. The taillights threw an eerie red glow on her face. Are you okay? My son. Have you seen my son? I looked around, but there was nothing visible except pouring rain. Please, I can't find my son. My car went off the road and I can't find him. There's no one here. Come on, we'll help you. I live just across the bridge. You can use our telephone. We'll come back with flashlights. You can borrow a raincoat and boots. She was wearing a plain pair of heels and her stockings were torn. There was no way she'd find anything in the storm and those shoes except a broken ankle. I held out a hand. When she took it, her fingers were ice cold. That's very kind of you, she said, passing a hand over her face. It smeared the blood on her forehead. I ran back to the car and got in. The woman climbed into the back seat. Brad stared at us, both like we'd each grown an extra head. You can drop her off with me, I said to him, explaining about her car and the missing boy. Brad just nodded. After a moment, he put the car into gear and pulled onto the road. Up ahead, I could see the old bridge, but it seemed to suck up the headlights, and the other side was just blackness. My house is just over here, I told her. My mom will help us look, and we can call the sheriff for help. I have to find him. He's only 3. We'll find him, I said firmly, trying to remember if we had extra batteries for the big flashlight in the kitchen, and if the oil lantern had been filled recently. Thank you for helping me. I've tried to stop so many cars, but no one would help. Brad replied automatically. No trouble, ma'am, because that's what boys in Coal Harbor do. They say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and open doors, and play football, and then graduate and go to the mines, or maybe get jobs on the big flat-bottom boats that go up and down the river, taking the spoils wherever they need to be. Overhead, lightning flashed. At almost the same instant, thunder shook the ground all around us, a deafening roar. I hugged myself against the cold. Brad reached for the heater, turning it all the way up, but the blowing air just made it worse. I just wanted to get home and get out of my wet clothes. Where's your car, Brad? Where's your car? Brad asked as we approached the bridge. I went off the road, the woman replied. She pointed. Off to the left, tire tracks had been carved into the soft earth, and a small sapling had been torn down. You're lucky you made it out. That gorge can be pretty deep in places, Brad said. I think we have some rope in the trunk. When the sheriff gets here, I can go down to see if he's in the car. Maybe we can pull it back up. I've waited forever for help. Don't worry, we can help you. As soon as we have some light, we'll be able to find your little boy. What's his name? Jimmy. The car bounced as we entered the covered bridge, and the sound of pounding rain ceased so suddenly it felt like pressure on my ears. I could still hear the rain on the roof of the bridge, but it no longer battered the car. There is at least a couple of cars that go off the road here every year, Brad said, like he was just trying to make conversation. I didn't think it was helping. We got to the other side of the bridge, and the pounding rain resumed. For a moment, it was deafening. I pulled on my ear where water was dripping inside. Golly, I could really use a towel right now. How about... But when I turned around, the back seat was empty. For a moment, I just stared, unable to process what was happening. Where had the woman gone? What's wrong? Brad asked. He glanced in the rearview mirror and disbelief washed over him. The car bumped back onto the gravel road on the other side of the bridge. The rain came down in sheets all around us. The lights from my house were just visible through the storm. Brad veered off the road, pulling into the yard. We both got out, looking around in the dark. I ripped open the back door, but aside from a damp spot on the seat and an abandoned shoe on the floor, there was no sign the woman had been there. I picked up the shoe, turning it this way and that. How could she possibly have gotten out of the car without us noticing? What on earth are you two doing? Mom shouted from the front porch. Brad and I stared at each other over the roof of the car. His face was ashen, hair plastered to his head. He got back behind the wheel without a word and backed onto the road, spitting gravel from under the tires, speeding off into the night, in the opposite direction of the bridge. I ran into the house, muttering something about car trouble and a hot bath to my mother. I left the shoe on my desk and went to warm up in the bath. By the time I came out, I was half convinced the whole thing had been a daydream, but the shoe was still sitting next to my math homework. I picked it up, sitting down on my bed to examine it. It was a simple, dark green pump with a sensible heel. Inside was a gold leaf manufacturer's name, a department store 2 towns over. Size 7. It was the type of thing any woman would wear. Another thought occurred to me. The football players were always parking with someone. The shoe could easily belong to the last girl Brad had gone out with. Disgusted, I dropped it back on my desk and turned off the light. I'd mostly forgotten about the shoe and the woman the next morning when Mom handed me a list for the store in town and asked me to pick some things up. I took my bicycle from the garage and set off, but slowed as I crossed the covered bridge. There was no sign of the woman, or even that Brad and I had been here the night before, except for some muddy tire tracks that faded away about a quarter of the way across. I got off my bicycle and went to the railing, looking out over the edge of the swollen creek far below. This time of year was more like a river, with rushing muddy water, sometimes up to 8, 10, even deeper. Sometimes up to 8 or 10 feet or even deeper. By summer, most of it would go back down to just waist deep, and all the kids from school would be swimming in the pool. To keep cool in the humid days of July and August. But the gorge would remain deep and cold, with fast-moving current that no one wanted to test. Something glinted in the water. I squinted, trying to get a better look. What was that under the surface? Leaving my bicycle, I ran to the far end of the bridge and stopped. The deep tire tracks were gone, and there was no sign of the bent sapling, just a tall, slightly crooked maple tree. I held onto the trunk, lowering myself over the edge and picking my way down the cliffside to the water. The swift current had certainly brought something up. The back bumper of the car was visible, the license plate covered in mud. I ran to the edge of the creek, unsure what to do. It wasn't as if I could pull a whole car out by myself. The current pushed the car against one of the support beams of the bridge. Bubbles rose to the surface, and with them, something else. I took off my shoes and waded in up to my knees to fish it out. A little black handbag, completely sodden. I took it back to shore as the car groaned, breaking free of the post and the boulders holding it in place. "Stop!" I cried, but nature never listens. The car drifted back out again and sank once more below the surface, vanishing for good. I sat down on a rock and opened the handbag. It was made of black cord with green nylon inside. It was full of mud and waterlogged paper. I pulled out a tube of lipstick and a powder compact. Stuck to the compact was a piece of paper. I peeled it off carefully. An old driver's license belonging to Maria Hannity, 141 Coalman Road, issued on May 14, 1939. In the smudged photo was the woman Brad and I found on the side of the road. Shaking, I stood up, clutching the purse and its contents to my chest. "I hope you found your son," I whispered. No one answered. So that's our reading for tonight. I hope that you enjoyed it. You can find out what happens to Brad and to Lily and to the friends that they are going to meet shortly. Over on the Patreon, we're up to episode 2 is already posted, and episode 3 will be going up shortly. Stay tuned, check out all of the links down below, and I hope that you all stay safe, stay healthy, and that you have something soft and fluffy to cuddle with.